Today's the 23rd day of Adar, the 23rd of March. We're on page Ein Chet in Korban Pesach in Derech Mitzvosecha. Now, so we started saying that here we're building on what we learned in Gida Nashe. In Gida Nashe, he introduced this concept of Muskal, Murgash, Mutba, intellectual, emotional, and habitual. And that all the midot, all the sfirot of Zah, are divided into these three. So the Chabad is the intellect, the Chagat is the emotional, and the Nehi is the habitual. Okay, so that we know. There we saw that habitual means that it even exists before the child is able to understand anything. It's just to copy what you see from your parents. If you copy what you see from your parents, then you're using your habitual sfirot. And we said that that's what Amalek attacks, so that there's no continuity from generation to generation. Okay, so now we added something more, and he said that really, Afal Pishu Beibur, Achar Kach Be'aba Ve'ima, Mo Shemvoa Reisha Dazah Ba'atika Achid V'Talia. So he says that the origin of all the midot, of all of Zah, is really from the Keter. It's like Dainu Shorsho, at the fourth line. Maybe you see it? Dainu Shorsho Kmo Shenimshach Me'aketer, Sharei Shorsho Me'aketer Lo Me'aba Ve'ima, Levad. So he starts from the crown. That's where his midos come from initially, because he would ask, where does he come from? So he's coming from the completely superconscious state. The crown, that's the real source. And then it comes down, and the first thing that develops is the habitual, and that's called tlat gotlat. That's called, like the Korban Pesach, 3 within 3, which is really 6 within 3, but we just say the 3 because we just see the head. We see the intellect between the knees. That's what we see. We don't see the emotional at all. And Amud Daf Ein Chet, right, 4th line. And it doesn't come yet from Abba and Ima. It's not yet from the father and mother. So this is very interesting. So he's saying that the origin of Zah is really not even from father and mother. Father and mother, what they given him is intellect later. How does the mother give it to him? Through the milk. But still in the state of gestation, he's in a state of 3 within 3, which means that only the 3 lower, the 3 habitual sfirot are seen. And they came directly from Keter. Okay, so now he's going to give examples of this. He says, first of all, there's a statement in Zohar, Reisha de Zah be'atika achid v'talia, that the head of Zah is connected to Atika. Atika is the highest part of the crown. Achid, it's unified, v'talia, and it's dependent on. So he says, Omnam shorishi tavuto. So I would think that if the Reisha of Zah, that would mean the intellect of Zah, the head of Zah. So he says, Omnam shorishi tavuto me'aketer ub'chinat ha'gimen shebo nikra nehi, lefi shehen atzmiuto, lefi ma shenitbe'er inyanam sham b'mitzvah anal, shem b'chinat etzem ha'midot שבלי דם ודעת, כי במידות יש מושכל, מורגש ומודבע, והן 3 בחינות שבהן שנתבהר שם. So really the way we need to understand this is that the Reisha is the beginning, not the head. So it says the beginning is the 3 first midot, the habitual, they come directly from Zah. Now it's from Keter. Now he's going to explain what it means. So this is the habitual. בחינת מוטבע שבהם, וכמו שאנו רואים באדם תחתון שיש לו מידות טבעיים. There's a whole concept in Chassidus of naturally or innate derived character traits. That a person has an innate character. It's a character that he can never change his whole life. It's something that he has. What can he change? He can only change his behavior.
Whoever says you can change?
Nah. You have to go back to the crown.
I had a lifetime to change one.
Shadow.
But it can't be done.
So we say, for all intents and purposes, this is the normal way to treat this, is to say, this is the way it's going to be. What can I change? I can change my behavior. We just finished Sefer Hamada in Rambam on Thursday. So very interesting there. When you read his take on midos, you see that by the Rambam midos meaning measures or character traits, means one's behavior. It doesn't mean his character in terms of inside. The inner aspect of the behavior he calls das, which is a very interesting thing in and of itself. And he says the das is really what the person acquired in terms of eternal truths. all kinds of truths that he understood from his learning, from his experience in life, whatever. That's his internal self. In Tanya, we say that his external is a behavior, same thing, but we say he has an internal, which is called midos in general. It's not just what he acquired, it's actually the way he was born. The Rambam doesn't hold by this at all, because his stress all the time is that you have free will to act however you want. Because a person can hear this, and I took upon myself when I learned it last week, that whenever I mention this concept, that there are innate midot, what he calls here midot tiviyot shelo, not teva midot, but midot tivim. There's two
like natural,
the innate character traits.
Yes.
Whenever I mention this, I'll mention that even though there is no free choice in these, you cannot change them for all intents and purposes, and we'll talk about what you said in a moment, but you can always control your behavior. It doesn't matter what your innate character traits tell you. You can still go against them. It just means you have a lot of work. It's very difficult. So what is it what we say about this? So we say the same thing. We say if you go back to the crown, you can pull down something new. But to go back to the crown, that's called Mesiras Nefesh. That's called having self-sacrifice. If you have self-sacrifice, you're willing to sacrifice yourself. It doesn't mean you have to actually go and put your head on a chopping block. What it means is that you're willing to go so far in changing yourself that it's like something that would take an entire lifetime. So you're giving up your whole life, as it were. Then maybe you can change something. But then it's still a maybe. It's not so clear. So anyway, so these three character traits, the first ones that Za has, again, that the small continents has, so where do we see them? We see them, for instance, in a person's taste. What kind of taste? Taste is habit. He says it's not an acquired trait. It's a habit. So when the child is born, so he likes certain things and he doesn't like other things. Almost all children, probably 99.9%, they love sweets. And, well, sweet doesn't have to necessarily be chocolate. In fact, probably chocolate is not the first thing because they like sugar more. It's like mamish like a.
It has a certain ingredient which is addictive.
Yeah. Okay.
So they like that the best.
Right. So that's the habit forming part of it. Like a lot of things. I'm sure that all the things that we like very much have something like that. They have something that you become very attached to. It's not just the sweetness is general. I don't think. In any case, so they like sweet and they hate something that's bitter. And this is also in a child that's 1 day old. And he can't say that here the taste. Remember we said this. The taste can be two things. Either taste in terms of what do you taste with your palate, or what do you taste in Hebrew. Tam is meaning. What is the reason behind something? That's also called taste in Hebrew. Tam. Two meanings of the word tam. So sometimes taste is something very, very low, like it's a habit. On the other hand, taste can be reason, which is something very high. It's in the intellect. So here we're talking about taste of the palate. Because he has no mind yet, so it's no reason for it. And even the animal, the brute, that has no dot, that has no consciousness, has these character traits. Sharei, tohav, tehov. It's very interesting. When I was looking at this word, how he says, we today would say tohav, and he uses a different form of it. It's just for anyone who studies Hebrew grammar. It's very interesting to see how the Rebbeim how they did grammar. So he says te'ehov, which is a different form of the same idea that it will love. And we would say tohav, which is nif'al, and te'ehov is ifil. It's a active verb. Te'ehov asavim tovim, vetarutz el hashoket asher ovsim ota ba, vetivrach midvarim harayim. The language. You see, as people who say that the people didn't speak Hebrew before Ben Yehuda have no idea what they're talking about. It's just complete nonsense. What? Ben Yehuda, yeah. I mean, you see this sentence. This is like, wow. People don't even write this way today. I'm talking about like, they didn't even write this way when Ben Yehuda was teaching them how to write Hebrew. Mamish, it's like unbelievable. This Hebrew is beautiful.
He improved it?
He turned it into a modern language because a lot of times they say that people didn't speak Hebrew before, which is nonsense, absolute nonsense. People spoke Hebrew everywhere.
He made a new word.
The real Hebrew, the correct Hebrew. Okay. But this sentence is beautiful, just to even say. שהרי תאהוב עשבים טובים ותרוץ אל השוקת אשר רובסים אותה בה ותברח מדברים הרעים והמרים ומן האש וכיוצא בזה. So the animal too has things that it wants and things that it doesn't want, things that it likes and things that it doesn't like, it doesn't have a taste for. It understands by itself to run to the where it's given the food. ושורש הוויית מידות אלו, even this, like nobody would speak like this today. שאינן מהשכל, היינו שזהו עצמיותן. And the root of these character traits, and we call these midos, we call these measures, that are not from the mind. They didn't come from the mind. The mind does not come first. In the animal soul, or in the innate character of the person, the mind does not precede the behavior. The mind comes afterwards. In other words, we learn to justify what we're doing. Why are we doing it? We don't know, because it comes from the crown. We have no clue why we're doing what we're doing. But these are innate character traits. And they're not from the mind. It comes from the self. The way it's been drawn down from the will that is higher than the mind, right? Because will is in crown. And then you have the intellect, then you have the emotional, then you have the habitual. Keter, Chabad, Chagat, Nehi. Will is the lowest part of the crown. No. Tava is something else. What's on? Yeah, will. ולכן המידות אלו חזקים ביותר לסיבת שורשן שהוא למעלה מהשכל ונעלה מכוח השכל. And that's why we find that these measures, these traits of character are so powerful and so difficult to move because they came from above the mind. There's no amount of explaining to someone that's going to change their behavior. Not their behavior, but their innate character. Their behavior they can control. Because the mind has control over the heart. But, for instance, you can't explain to a child, don't eat sweets because it's not good for you. You can't. It doesn't make any difference. Even if they understand it, it doesn't mean anything. Because it takes a long time for the person to even gain control over his behavior. Because these are very strong. מוכן מובן למעלה ששורש הוויית הזה מהכתר ומבחינת נהי שבו שאין עצמיות המידות עליונות. And likewise, above, meaning in the spiritual, when we mean above, we don't really mean just above. He gave us an example from human psychology, but it's the same thing in us. We also have a Zah. We said that's the image of God in every one of us. So the root of Zah comes from the crown, and that root manifests as his three lower habitual sfirot, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, victory, acknowledgement, and foundation. שהן עצמיות המידות עליונות, והן שורשן למעלה מאהבה. Their root is higher than father and mother. Those are the intellectual. It's not even the intellectual here. It's not even talking about the intellectual. By the way, that's just first time I read, maybe I'm missing Foundations of Kabbalah. I have to retake that class, whatever that class was at some point. I read in Rav Chaim Vital this Shabbos, so he says, in Rav Chaim Vital, he gives this principle, this rule of thumb, which I don't think I ever heard before. He says, when it says Ava, Abba ve'ima in the Zohar, it means the partsufim that we know, and when it says Chokhmah b'bina, it means the sfirot. But he explains why does he sometimes use this and sometimes use that. He says, when you say Chokhmah b'bina, you mean it's the Chokhmah and Bina in the partsuf itself. When you say Ava, you mean it's from outside the partsuf. It's a simple thing, but I never noticed that this is like a rule. I don't know why I never stated it to myself this way, but he said it. So here he's saying that later his intellect is Chachma Bina Das, his wisdom and understanding and knowledge is going to come from his father and mother. But that's later. That's Zaz, that is the small continence's intellect. But initially he only has his habits. And the habits come from the crown, from Atika, from somewhere much higher. As was explained in the mitzvah of tefillin, we didn't learn this. This shows that the order that he wrote was not the order of the mitzvahs. Because here he says tefillin before Korban Pesach. No, sorry, I made a mistake. Why am I saying this? This is not true. Tefillin is before Korban Pesach. Is it? No, it's after. I am right. Tefillin is after. First Moshe gives them the commandment to make the Korban Pesach. Then afterwards he explains that when your sons ask you what is this whole thing, and then he mentions tefillin. So yeah, it's true. I remember when I learned this, I thought this was a proof that he didn't write the whole book in the order of the mitzvahs according to the Torah. He skipped in some order. I don't know. In any case, he says, I already mentioned in the second chapter of Tefillin, Binyan HaRetzuot, why do we have the straps coming down at least to they have to be at least to the navel. The length of the... Shechiyut from what to what?
Shechiyut, down.
Can, but from what to what? So he says the tefillin are the crown, and they're giving you the habitual mitzvot, which are the nehi. The nehi starts from the kidneys, so it has to go at least down to the navel. Then it has to be the length one of them is short and one of them is long. The one that's long, the right side, which is longer, it needs to go at least down to the male member. It has to reach there, because that's the whole nehi. You have to cover the whole victory, acknowledgement, and foundation, which is what the crown gives you when you were initial. But here it's like you're Zah yourself. You're the small countenance, and now this is what you're enacting. This is what you're doing. So he explained that in the second chapter. And then these character traits, they are in gestation. Zah is in gestation in his mother. And then, when there is a unification between mother and father, which we would call in the physical world a conception, then the mochin is added. The mind is added. The intellect is added. So that needs discussion, like what is that in the physical world? Because we know that there's nothing there before conception. Before conception there's nothing. So what do we say so what do we have to say? We have to say that the ovum, the way it is before conception, is how it was from crown. That already determines the character traits. And the conception of the semen, or the how do you say it in one word? Not the semen, the seed from the father enters into the ovum, that creates the intellect. And that's apparently why the ovum doesn't develop until there's conception. Because there's no intellect to drive it. Because in the end, to develop you need intellect. Okay, so we'll see more tomorrow. Right, it's another way of saying it.